All right, so over the weekend in Buffalo, New York, there was yet another mass shooting here in the United States, which obviously is unfortunately not that uncommon, but the specifics of this shooting are a little bit more unique. The shooter actually tried to live stream the entire thing, as well as published a manifesto online where he basically describes in full detail why he did what he did, and it is, no surprise, some of the same shit that we have been seeing for years now in this country of white supremacist domestic terrorism. And on top of mass shootings in general not being that uncommon, the justifications, as you're about to see in this piece here, of why he said he did what he did are also things that you could just hear on any given night from an average Fox News segment. So let's go ahead and get into some of the details here from NBC News. They say the Buffalo supermarket shooting suspect allegedly posted an apparent manifesto repeatedly citing the Great Replacement theory, and the manifesto includes dozens of pages of anti-Semitic and racist memes, repeatedly citing the racist Great Replacement conspiracy theory frequently pushed by white supremacists. So if you don't know what the Great Replacement theory is, I think they touch on it a little bit in this piece, but essentially it's this idea that Democrats or the left or George Soros, depending on who you're talking to at any given moment, are attempting to intentionally import immigrants into this country, specifically non-white immigrants into this country, in an effort to disempower or to dilute the power of white Americans. And this is something that has been pushed by, propagandists like Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, plenty of other white nationalist propagandists who are some of the biggest ones in the country. So again, it is an absolutely wild conspiracy theory, but at the same time, it is mainstream within the modern conservative movement. So here we got from NBC News. They say a manifesto allegedly written and posted by the suspect in a mass shooting at a Buffalo supermarket that killed 10 people, most of them black, laid out specific plans to attack black people and repeatedly cited the Great Replacement theory, the false idea that a cabal is attempting to replace white Americans with non-white people through immigration, interracial marriage, and eventually violence. So again, basically at a fundamental level, these are just fascist white supremacist talking points, and really what they're against in an inherent fundamental way is they're against an expanding multiracial democracy, right? There's no justification for being against immigrants or having them become citizens unless you're just against a multiracial democracy. And that, again, at a fundamental level is exactly what they are against. But they continue saying the manifesto, which appears to have been written by 18-year-old Peyton Gendron, includes a shared birth date and biographical details with the suspect in custody, and the PDF was originally posted to Google Docs at 8:55 p.m. and Thursday, 2 days before the shooting, according to file data assessed by NBC News. And they say he was remanded without bail, and a felony hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning, according to the office. And the manifesto, which has not been modified since it was posted on Thursday, includes elaborate details of a planned shooting, and the document claims the suspect chose Buffalo because it was the city with the highest number of black people within his vicinity, so he drove apparently multiple hours to go to this location, specifically because they had the highest percentage in this county of a black population, which is his motivation for going there in the first place. But they say 11 of the 13 people shot at the Tops Friendly Market were black, police said, and they say the manifesto includes dozens of pages of anti-Semitic and racist memes, repeatedly citing the racist Great Replacement conspiracy theory, frequently pushed by white supremacists, which again falsely claims that white people are being replaced in America as part of an elaborate Jewish conspiracy theory, and other memes use tropes and discredited data to denigrate the intelligence of non-white people. And in the manifesto, Gendron claims that he was radicalized on 4chan while he was bored at the beginning of the COVID pandemic in early 2020, and the document also claims critical race theory, a right-wing talking point that has come to generally encompass teaching about race in school, is part of a Jewish plot and a reason to justify the mass killing of Jews. So again, ties back into these other conspiracies that are being pushed by conservatives right now, reactionary conservatives, basically just to drum up fear in white people and to make them feel as though there's some grand conspiratorial attack against the white population here in the United States. And we've seen the bans. I mean, I've talked about it on this channel plenty of times, like the one down in Florida that was passed by the fascist governor Ron DeSantis, where they basically just outlaw any actual discussions that get into the history of the United States and the racial history and how that has been baked into our institutions for centuries. And really just bans any discussions that make little white kids uncomfortable. So, this is all coming back full circle, and it's all a part of the same exact branch of white supremacist talking points. But they continue here saying, in the manifesto, Gendron repeatedly cites Brenton Tarrant, the white supremacist mass shooter who killed 51 people and injured 40 others at the Christchurch, New Zealand mosque in 2019. And like Gendron, Tarrant live streamed his attack, and Tarrant told investigators he was also a frequent visitor of 4chan. So clearly lots of people, young people specifically, are being radicalized in a lot of these forums. But they continue saying the theory has been cited by several mass shooters since 2018, including Robert Bowers, who was charged with killing 11 people at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh in 2018, also by Patrick Crucius, who allegedly killed 23 people in El Paso, Texas at that Walmart, and John Earnest, who pled guilty to murdering 1 and injuring 3 others at Poway, California Synagogue in 2019. So again, pretty common reoccurrence that we've been seeing in the last number of years. But finally, they say great replacement theory has recently received support from traditional power centers of the American right. And according to the AP NORC poll released this week, 1 in 3 U.S. adults, 1 in 3, believes there is an ongoing effort to replace U.S.-born Americans with immigrants for electoral gains. So again, this is something that is very much mainstream now in the United States. This is not some fringe conspiracy where one guy with a mental illness went off and he was a lone wolf and he acted by himself with no inspiration from other people. No, this is a very mainstream political opinion at this point, that there's some grand conspiracy to disempower white Americans in favor of bringing in immigrants to, I don't know, give them more electoral voting power. I mean, again, at a fundamental level, the only way that you could be against, having immigrants come to this country, which has been supposedly, at least according to our, our history that conservatives like to preach about, the United States has always supposed to be this shining city on a hill of immigrants, a place where immigrants can come and you can set up a life and work hard and do all these things. Well, at a fundamental level, Republicans and conservatives are saying they're against that, right? They're against the idea of expanding a multiracial democracy in the United States, or even allowing immigrants who are not coming from European nations to enter the country in the first place, let alone empower them to vote in elections. But finally, they say Fox News' Tucker Carlson has repeatedly pushed replacement rhetoric on his show. I know that the left and all the little gatekeepers on Twitter become literally hysterical if you use the term replacement, if you suggest for the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots, with new people, more obedient voters from the third world. So again, splashing in just rampantly racist rhetoric here, as if people who are immigrants coming from poor countries around the world, that they're just inherently subservient to the Democratic Party. Again, there's no evidence for this. There's no actual underlying thesis that's substantiated by anything, but this is the rhetoric that they're using. And just to give you a video perspective here, the New York Times put together a montage of all of the different times that Tucker Carlson has been using this type of rhetoric, which could directly lead to more people to be inspired to feel as though their heritage or that white people are under attack by minorities and by immigrants, and could inspire more people to do shootings exactly like the one that we just saw in Buffalo. So let's go ahead and watch some of this.
In order to win and maintain power, Democrats plan to change the population of the country. This is how radical demographic change happens. I don't want to live in a country that looks nothing like the country I grew up in. They can embrace the issues the middle class cares about, or they can import an entirely new electorate from the third world and change the demographics of the U.S. so completely they'll never lose again. Democrats know if they import enough new voters, they'll be able to run the country forever. Dramatic demographic change means many Americans don't recognize where they grew up. As with illegal immigration, the long-term agenda of refugee resettlement is to bring in future Democratic voters. Illegal immigrants are the key to their power. The point is to import as many new Democratic voters as possible. The whole point of their immigration policy is to ensure political control, replace the population. This policy is called the Great Replacement, the replacement of legacy Americans with more obedient people from faraway countries.
Okay, so you guys get the point. Notice at the end there how he says legacy Americans, because he can't say indigenous Americans, because that would not apply to white people. He can't say Native Americans, because again, that would not apply to white people, because we came to this country and colonized it and conducted a genocide to replace the actual indigenous Native people to what is now the modern United States. So again, at a fundamental level, it's kind of like ridiculous at face value to suggest in the first place that white people own the land land that we are talking about right now, or that there should be some exclusionary principle to the benefit of European Americans as opposed to anybody else. It's completely ridiculous at face value, but again, you see all the different rhetoric that he's been using. I mean, it's word for word, almost verbatim, exactly what that shooter was hinting at in his manifesto, talking about the Great Replacement Theory, talking about this giant conspiracy of Democrats trying to bring in as many immigrants as possible who are going to be subservient to their every will, which, again, at face value is kind of stupid if you know who Joe Biden is, if you know who Obama was. I mean, he was famously known as the deporter-in-chief for a reason, right? Because he was deporting record levels of people, right? And same with Joe Biden right now. He's deploying the exact same policies, immigration policies, that Donald Trump was running with. So, it's not as if Joe Biden and the Democratic Party actually believes in like open border policies, as Tucker Carlson would like you to believe. No, they're actually in favor of very, very restrictive policies, specifically when it comes to, people who are non-white. I mean, we saw this in the case of Ukraine, which is great and fine. I support the United States and a bunch of other countries as well in Europe accepting Ukrainian refugees, but contrast that and the treatment that we and other countries have given to Ukrainian white refugees, as opposed to how we treat, for example, Haitian asylum seekers that try to show up in the United States seeking asylum and are, using the Title IV as an example, are literally just cast away without even getting their international legally required due process to seek asylum in the United States. So, I mean, it's definitely a difference in treatment that we give already, even under a Democratic administration, a difference between how we treat white immigrants and how we treat non-white immigrants. So the idea that Democrats are importing or, having an open door policy for as many non-white immigrants to come in as possible is it's completely ridiculous at face value. But this is a type of rhetoric that is being pushed by the mainstream conservative movement. Again, that statistic showing that a third of Americans believe in basically the Great Replacement Theory. But just to hammer it home in terms of just how little white nationalist propagandists like Tucker Carlson give a single shit about the type of violence that they are inspiring in this country, this was just a couple weeks ago on May 1st. Tucker Carlson taking a picture of himself giving this creepy as fuck smile, posing with a New York Times article that was basically getting into how Tucker Carlson, I don't know if you guys can read it down there, but it says American nationalist, and they're pointing out how Tucker Carlson has been stoking white fear to conquer cable news. And again, this demonic looking apparition right here is the most famous and the most watched cable news host in the entire country. So, this propaganda that he's been pushing is clearly effective, and that's how you end up with a situation in which a third of Americans believe in a white nationalist propaganda piece like the Great Replacement Theory. But just to hammer it home here in terms of how little Fox News or Fox News propagandists are going to learn from any of this, this was a segment that they ran literally directly after when they were talking about this shooting that happened up in Buffalo. So here they have, Rob Astornio, former Westchester County executive, and he's talking about a secret flight carrying 150 plus migrants to enter New York City. So right after they're covering this shooting that was conducted explicitly along the same propaganda lines that they push on a daily basis, that immigrants are coming, they're coming to take away, your land, they're coming to take away your power, your economic power in this country, they then turn around in the exact next segment and start pushing this same exact fear-mongering that led to the type of rise in violence inspired by the Great Replacement Theory that we're seeing right now. So again, unfortunately, at the end of the day, this is the modern conservative movement. I mean, they have absolutely no problem using this type of propaganda that will inevitably inspire violence, because the propaganda inherently suggests violence that is going to be wielded or that is currently being wielded against white people, even though it's entirely made up and it's entirely bullshit and it's just fascist propaganda. At the end of the day, it is going to continue to have consequences like this, where absolutely insane people are going to, use these as justifications to go out there and murder black people or murder minorities or, Hispanic people that are coming in the country, or Muslim people that are coming into the country, or those who have lived here for years and years and years and years. So, it's completely insane, but at the same time, this is the modern conservative movement. So you got to understand this stuff, and you got to understand how mainstream this truly has become, so that we can all try to at least push back against these talking points and try to debunk them when we have the opportunity, and make sure that, this type of violence is not just normalized in this country.